After a terrible date, she headed for the exit, until the ruthless Don said, "You're coming with me." The date was already dead by the time the bread basket arrived. Elena Vasquez sat across from a man named Craig who had, in the span of 37 minutes, mentioned his ex-girlfriend 4 times, corrected the waiter twice about nothing important, and then, with the kind of confidence that only belongs to people who have never been told no, slid the bill toward the center of the table and looked at her like she would know what to do with it. She knew exactly what to do with it. She folded her napkin, she placed it neatly on the table, she picked up her purse, and she stood. "I need some air," she said, which was technically true, because the air in this restaurant had started to feel like it belonged to someone who talked about himself for a living. Craig said something, she did not hear it, she was already moving. The restaurant was the kind of place that had too many mirrors and not enough light. Everything was dark wood and low candles, and the murmur of people pretending to enjoy evenings that cost more than they should. Elena had worn heels for this. She had ironed the blue dress. She had told herself, standing in front of her bathroom mirror at 7 in the evening, that this was a good idea. She had been wrong about that the way she was never wrong about numbers. She moved through the dining room without looking at anyone, her eyes on the far wall, her only goal being the door. Not the front door, that would mean passing Craig's sightline again, and she had already decided that Craig was a chapter she was closing without a second reading. She turned left at the edge of the dining room, into a narrower corridor she assumed led to the coat check or the back exit. It did not lead to the coat check. The corridor was dim, stone-floored. The noise of the restaurant dropped behind her like she had stepped through a curtain. Ahead, a single bare bulb hung above a door marked service. She pushed through it. What she walked into was not the street. It was a loading area, concrete walls, a long utility table pushed against one side. 2 men she had never seen before were on the floor, not unconscious, but still in the way that people get when they have been told very clearly and very finally to stop moving. A third man stood near the far wall, his back half turned to her. He was not large in the way that threatened. He was simply the kind of person who made a room feel occupied the moment he entered it. Dark suit, no tie. One hand at his side, the other adjusting the cufflink at his wrist with the absolute calm of someone who had just finished a task he considered routine. He turned when he heard the door. And Elena, who had survived 2 IRS audits, 1 apartment fire, and a Sunday dinner where her father had invited both her ex-boyfriend and her current one without telling either of them, felt something she did not have a clean name for move through her chest. On the floor near one of the still men, a phone buzzed against the concrete. The screen lit up. The contact name read Mom. She stared at that phone for what was probably 2 seconds and felt like 10 years. The man near the wall looked at her. He had dark eyes and the kind of face that had been built for decisions. He did not seem alarmed. He seemed like a man updating a calculation. "Wrong door," Elena said, because she was good under pressure and that was the first thing that came out. "Yes," he said. He agreed with her the way someone agrees when the facts are not in dispute but the situation is. He looked at her for a moment longer, then said, "You're coming with me." Her feet moved. She noted this with the detached interest of a person watching something happen to someone else. She had not decided to follow him. Her feet, apparently, had done that without consulting the rest of her. He opened the far door and walked through it. She followed. The door closed behind them with a sound like a period at the end of a sentence, and the loading area with the 2 still men and the buzzing phone went dark behind her. She did not look back. She would think about that later, the not looking back, what it meant that she had not even tried. He moved through a back corridor with the ease of someone who had memorized the bones of this building, who knew which turn led where before he had to think about it. Elena kept pace. She was not sure why. She told herself it was because the alternative going back through that door, stepping over those men, pretending she had seen nothing while she flagged down a cab, was not actually an alternative, because whoever had taken the photograph already knew her face. She did not know about the photograph yet. That part came later. Right now she was simply walking beside a man she did not know, down a corridor she did not recognize, away from the worst date of her adult life, into something that had no name yet. The car was black and quiet and waiting at the back of the building with the engine running. A man in the front seat did not turn around. The back door was opened from the outside by someone she did not see clearly. She got in. The man in the dark suit got in beside her. The door closed. The city moved past the windows. Alina pressed her knees together and looked straight ahead and did not ask where they were going, because she was either about to find out or she wasn't, and asking was not going to change that. She was good at processing things in the correct order. This was a thing she had learned from her father, who had opened a restaurant with $800 and a borrowed oven, and had never once panicked where anyone could see him. She was panicking, but nobody could see it. "My name is Dante Reyes," the man said. He did not look at her when he said it. He said it the way people state facts, without expectation, without waiting to see if the name meant anything. It did mean something. She was an accountant who worked with small businesses in a city where certain names moved through financial circles the way weather moves through a coast. You heard the name. You knew, broadly, what it signified. You never expected to be sitting next to it in a car at 9 in the evening with your ironed blue dress and your useless heels, and the memory of a phone screen that said Mom. "Alina Vasquez," she said, because if he was giving his name, she would give hers. It felt like the one thing she still controlled. He nodded, one small movement. Then he looked out the window. They did not speak again until the car stopped. The building they entered had a lobby that looked like a bank that had decided it was also an art gallery. Marble floors, high ceilings, a security desk with 2 men behind it who did not check their credentials because they did not need to. The elevator was private, a key and a code, both of which Dante used without hurrying. Alina stood beside him and counted floors by watching the number panel rise. The penthouse. She had expected something that looked like what people imagined when they said the word dangerous. Dark rooms, locked doors, the smell of warning. What she got was a room with floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city like the city was a painting someone had commissioned. Good furniture, real books on the shelf, not the decorative kind. A kitchen that looked like it had actually been used, and on the large wooden desk near the window, sitting between a closed laptop and a neat stack of folders, a small ceramic bowl. Hand-painted, cream-colored, tiny blue flowers around the rim. She stared at it for a moment longer than she meant to. "Guest room," Dante said, and he indicated a hallway. "Lock works from the inside." She turned from the bowl. "Am I a guest?" He considered the word like it was a contract he was reviewing. "For now," he said. She nodded. She went to look at the room, because that was the next thing to do, and doing the next thing was how she survived situations that did not have clear instructions. The room was clean and plain and had a window she could not open from the outside. The lock did, in fact, work from the inside. She turned it and stood there in the quiet, and for the first time since she had pushed through the wrong door, she let herself feel the full weight of the evening. The terrible date, Craig and his ex-girlfriend and his careful division of a bill. The heels she had worn because she had wanted the evening to mean something. The apartment she had been going home to, where the coffee Marcus had bought, was still in the cabinet because she had not been able to throw it away, and throwing it away would mean something she was not ready for it to mean. She had been so relieved, somewhere underneath the fear, to have somewhere else to be tonight. That thought sat in her chest, in a way she did not examine too closely. She sat on the edge of the bed. She set her purse on her knees. She looked at the far wall and thought about the phone on the floor with Mom on the screen. Tomorrow, she told herself, she would figure out the rest. She was good at figuring things out. She just needed tonight to be over first. The morning was gray through the window. Alina woke up still in her blue dress, which told her she had fallen asleep without meaning to. She sat up, pressed her hands flat on the mattress, and ran through the facts of the previous evening in the order they had happened. She did this the way she ran through numbers, without letting emotion color the sequence until she had the whole picture laid out in front of her. Fact 1, she had walked through the wrong door. Fact 2, she had seen something she could not unsee. Fact 3, she had followed a man named Dante Reyes out of a building and into a car and up to a penthouse without saying no. Fact 4, she did not know what the next step was, which was a feeling she did not enjoy and did not visit often. She smoothed the front of her dress, stood, and unlocked the bedroom door. The main room was bright in the morning, the city spread wide below the windows. Dante was not in sight, but there were sounds from the kitchen, quiet ones, the kind that belong to someone who is comfortable in a space. Alina crossed the room and stopped in the kitchen doorway. He was making coffee, that was all. A French press, a small white cup, and the entirely ordinary act of pushing the plunger down without looking up. "There's a second cup," he said. She came in and sat at the kitchen counter and accepted the coffee. It was good. She noted that with the part of her brain that was always taking notes and wished it would stop. "I need to understand what's happening," she said. He sat down across the counter from her and looked at her in that way he had, not unkind, not cold, simply direct, like he was reading a document and had reached the part that mattered. "What you saw last night involved two men who work for someone who has been watching my organization for several months. Those men were sent as a message. The message was received. What does that have to do with me? You saw their faces, which means they saw yours." He lifted his cup. "The people they work for don't leave loose ends." She absorbed this, "So I'm a loose end." "Not here." She looked at him for a moment, "But outside." "Outside," he said carefully, "you would need to be careful." She turned the coffee cup in her hands and thought about that. She was an accountant who worked out of an office on the 4th floor of a building that smelled like old carpet. She had 3 audit clients, a lease on a 1-bedroom apartment, and a cabinet with Marcus's coffee in it. She was not, in any version of her life that she had planned, a person who needed to be careful in the way Dante Reyes meant. "And yet." "How long?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment. "I'm working on that." It was not the answer she wanted. It was, she suspected, the honest one. She set her cup down. She looked at the desk by the window, at the neat stack of folders, at the laptop closed, at the ceramic bowl with the small blue flowers sitting in the middle of it all like something that had wandered into the wrong room and stayed. She did not ask about the bowl. She almost did. "I would like my bag," she said instead. "I left it at the restaurant." He reached beneath the counter and set her purse on top of it. Her actual purse, the one she had left when she stood up from the table and told Craig she needed air. She stared at it. "Your date retrieved it from the table and handed it to the host," Dante said, without inflection. "One of my people collected it. One of your people was at the restaurant. One of my people is in most places." She picked up the purse. Inside was everything: her phone, her keys, her lip balm, and the small notebook she carried because she thought better with a pen in her hand. All of it there. She felt absurdly better. "Fine," she said. She put the purse down. "Then I would like to use your internet." He looked at her. "For what?" "I have a client whose quarterly reports are due on Friday, and I am not going to miss a deadline because I walked through the wrong door." Something crossed his face. Not quite a smile. The space where a smile might have been briefly before the door to it closed again. He turned the laptop on the desk to face the empty chair across from it and went back to his coffee. She sat at his desk and opened her email. The folders were right there. Neat, organized, labeled. The kind of system that someone careful used. She was not going to look at them. She had excellent professional discipline, and this was not her business, and she was absolutely not going to look at them. She lasted 40 minutes. She did not open them. She did not touch them. But the edge of one label was visible, a company name she recognized, and beneath it in small print, a subsidiary structure that she recognized the shape of the way a doctor recognizes a symptom. She had seen that shape before, in a client's books. The specific geometry of money that was trying to go somewhere without being seen. She looked at the label for a long time. Then she looked at Dante, who was reading something in the chair by the window and had not looked at her. She thought about whether to say something. She went back to her client's quarterly report and did not say anything yet. 3 days passed in a way that was almost ordinary, which was the strangest part. She woke, she made coffee, or he did. She worked at his desk in the mornings, and he worked from wherever he worked in the afternoons, which sometimes meant calls in the other room with the door closed, and sometimes meant he was simply not there, and the apartment was quiet. He returned without announcement. She did not ask where he had been. They ate meals that appeared from somewhere, brought up by people she saw briefly and never learned the names of. They talked, occasionally in the evenings, not about what had happened, about other things. He asked about her work, and she told him more than she meant to, because he asked questions the way someone asks who already knows the shape of the answer and wants to see if you'll give it honestly. She answered honestly, because she was bad at lying to people who were not impressed by it. On the third evening she found herself at his desk again after dinner, not working, just sitting, and she pulled the ceramic bowl from the corner of the desk to the center and turned it in her hands. It was old, the paint was worn in places. The flowers around the rim were handmade, imperfect, which meant someone had painted them rather than printed them. She set it back. Dante looked up from across the room. She did not ask, he did not explain. She thought about Marcus. She did not think about him with the ache she had carried for 8 months. She thought about him and felt, for the first time, mostly just tired of thinking about him. Like a song that had been playing for too long, and she was finally, almost imperceptibly, ready to turn it off. She did not know what to do with that, so she went to bed. The next morning she woke up at 6 and sat at the desk with her coffee and opened the folder. Not all of it, just the top sheet, the one whose edge she had been reading for 3 days. She read it the way she read everything, clean, fast, without judgment, just looking for what the numbers were trying to tell her. Numbers always told you something. They could not help it. People could lie with their words and their faces and their explanations, but the numbers eventually always pointed somewhere. These numbers pointed somewhere very specific. She sat with her coffee going cold and followed the line from the subsidiary to the parent company to the account that was drawing small amounts, never large enough to trigger a review, always just below the threshold, across 18 months. It was not a large operation. It was a careful one, patient, the kind of skimming that takes time to notice because it is designed to look like rounding errors. She knew who was doing it before she finished the 3rd page. Not the name, she didn't have the name, but she knew the style. She had seen it before in a different set of books, in a different year, in a different life. She was 19 the first time she saw this. Standing in the back office of her father's restaurant, the book spread on the desk, the number that should not have been there glowing on the page like something alive. The person it pointed to had been trusted, had been family almost, had smiled at her across every Sunday dinner for 6 years. She had not told anyone for 3 weeks. She had been afraid of what the telling would mean. She was not 19 now. She set the page down. She aligned it perfectly with the edge of the folder. She picked up the coffee cup, found it cold, set it down. She looked at the city out the window, gray morning light, early traffic, the city going about its business without knowing or caring about any of this. Then she waited for Dante to come out of his room. He appeared at 7, already dressed, and went to the kitchen. She stayed at the desk. When he came back with his coffee, he looked at the open folder and then at her. She did not apologize. "Someone in your own organization," she said, "has been moving money for a year and a half, slowly, carefully, below the threshold." She turned the top page toward him. "This account here, it feeds into 2 others, and from those 2 into a 4th that sits outside your visible structure." He did not move. "The 4th account," she said, "has a pattern that matches the payment timing of someone who is paid on the 15th and the last day of every month." He came to the desk. He looked at the page. His face was still, but not the practiced stillness of his public manner. This was something else, something that had been hit and was deciding how to hold itself. She had seen that look before, not on a man like him, on her father. The Sunday afternoon with the books on the desk and the person they both loved sitting in the next room. She did not say that. She just moved the 2nd page to the top so he could read it. He read it. He was quiet for a long time. Then he picked up the folder and went to the window. He stood there with his back to her for almost a full minute. She let him. She understood needing a minute. She got up and went to make fresh coffee, because it was the only thing that felt both useful and kind, and she was bad at kind without something practical attached to it. She brought 2 cups back and set one on the desk and took hers to the chair by the window where she had been watching him read. He turned around. He looked at her with an expression she did not quite have a category for. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. She thought about that. It was a fair question. "Because it's what the numbers say," she said. "And ignoring what the numbers say doesn't make them wrong. It just means you find out later when it costs more." He looked at her for another long moment. Then he sat down. 2 mugs, same desk, same gray morning. She did not fill the silence. He did not fill it either. They sat with the information between them like something that had been set down and would need to be picked up soon, but not quite yet. It was, she realized, the most honest hour she had spent with another person in longer than she could cleanly measure. The ceramic bowl sat at the corner of the desk. She did not look at it. She almost did. The apartment felt different on the 4th morning. Not smaller, larger somehow, quieter in the wrong places. Elena noticed it when she walked into the main room and Dante was already at the window, not with coffee, not with a folder, just standing there with his hands at his sides looking at the city below. She did not say good morning. She went to the kitchen and made coffee and brought 2 cups without being asked, and he took his without turning fully away from the window. She stood beside him, far enough apart that it was not anything, close enough that it was not nothing. "They moved last night," he said. She waited. "The rival group, they made contact with 2 of my people, warned them off." He turned the cup in his hand. "Which means they've accelerated their timeline." "What does that mean for?" she started. "It means the person inside my organization is feeding them information about when I'm moving and when I'm not." He finally looked at her. "Which means they know I'm here, and they know I'm not alone." She absorbed this. "They know about me," she said. He did not soften it. "Yes." She had known, somewhere, since the morning of the 2nd day. She had known the way you know something unpleasant is coming when the sky changes before a storm, not the fact itself, but the shape of it. She had filed it in the back of her mind and worked around it for days. She put her coffee down on the windowsill. "Okay," she said. He looked at her. "Okay." "I'm not going to panic about it," she said, which was what she said when she was, in fact, feeling a very controlled and organized version of panic. Panicking is not useful. What is useful is knowing what they know and what they plan to do with it. "They plan to use you," he said simply, "as leverage, to slow down whatever action I take against the person inside." She thought about this carefully. She was leverage. That was, objectively, A remarkable thing to be on a Thursday morning. "Who is it?" she asked. "The person inside, do you know?" He was quiet for 3 full seconds. She counted. "I have a name," he said. "I've had it since the morning you showed me those pages." "But you haven't moved on it." "No." She looked at him. "Why not?" He set his cup down on the windowsill beside hers. 2 cups, side by side in the gray morning light. "Because the name is someone I have trusted for 11 years, and trust is not a thing I give often or take back easily." She understood that, not in the abstract, in the specific way of someone who had stood in a restaurant back office at 19, with a number on a page that pointed at a man who had been coming to Sunday dinner for 6 years. She had taken 3 weeks to say it out loud. She had said it, finally, because her father had deserved to know, because the truth was kinder than the silence even when the truth was terrible. "You already know," she said. "You just haven't said it to yourself yet." He looked at her with an expression she was starting to be able to read, which was something she had not expected to learn in this apartment, and had learned anyway. It was the look of a man who was deciding to let something land. He said a name, one word, a first name only. She did not recognize it, but she recognized the way it came out of him, flat and careful and costing something. "I'm sorry," she said. He did not say thank you. He did not say it was fine. He picked up his coffee and drank from it and looked at the city, and she stood beside him, and let the morning be what it was. By afternoon, things began to move. He made calls brief, coded in a way she could not track but could hear the precision of. People came to the apartment twice that day, different people each time, and went to the second room with him and came out without her. She stayed at the desk. She finished her client's quarterly report. She sent it. She stared at her inbox and thought about the fact that her inbox existed, and her apartment existed, and her life was proceeding on its normal rails somewhere in the city below, completely unaware that she was up here being leverage. The absurdity of it was the thing she kept returning to. The heels, Craig, the bread basket. The wrong door. The distance between where she had been going that evening and where she had ended up was so large that it had stopped feeling real and started feeling like a story someone else was in. Then the story reminded her it was hers. She had gone to use the bathroom in the hallway, which passed the door of the room she slept in, and when she came back she stopped in the doorway of her room. Something was on the pillow. She did not go in right away. She stood in the doorway and looked at it from a distance. It was a photograph. She crossed the room in 5 steps and picked it up and looked at it and felt, very clearly and very precisely, the bottom drop out of the careful structure she had been building for the past 4 days. It was her, not from the restaurant corridor. This was older. The setting was familiar, the street outside her apartment building. The clothing was something she had worn 2 weeks ago. She recognized the jacket, and she recognized the particular Tuesday it had come from because she had bought coffee from the cart on the corner and been annoyed that they were out of oat milk. 2 weeks ago. They had been watching her for 2 weeks before the dinner, before Craig, before the wrong door. She sat on the edge of the bed with the photograph in her hands, and her mind moved, fast and clean and without sentiment, through what this meant. It meant this had never been coincidental. It meant she had not stumbled into this. She had been found, identified, watched, and the corridor had been a moment they had expected her to walk through before she had walked through it. She was not a loose end. She was a planned asset. Someone had decided she was useful before she had decided anything at all. Her hands did not shake. She noticed them not shaking and felt, somewhere deep and private, a small ugly rush of something that was not fear and not relief, but was the thing she always reached for when the fear was too much: anger. Clean and familiar. The kind that did not burn wild. The kind that settled her spine and sharpened everything behind her eyes. She stood, she set the photograph on the bed, she walked back out to the main room. Dante was at the desk. He looked up when she came in. She put the photograph on the desk in front of him. He looked at it. His face did not move, but his stillness changed quality. It became the stillness of something that had taken a hit and was deciding where the damage was. "They were in your room," he said. "While I was with you," she said. "Or while you were in that room with your people, whichever window it was." He picked up the photograph, turned it over, set it down. "The person on the inside," she said, "told them when it was safe." "Yes." She looked at him directly. "Which means the name you said this morning isn't just someone who took money. It's someone who just put me in danger deliberately, today, while I was in this apartment." He met her eyes. She did not look away from it. "Then stop waiting," she said. "Whatever you've been deciding whether to do, stop deciding and do it." The anger in her chest was the old, known thing. The thing she had learned at 19 was more useful than grief. She had been sitting in this apartment for 4 days being careful and quiet and reasonableness had not stopped someone from walking into her room and leaving that photograph on her pillow. She crossed to the desk and picked up the ceramic bowl. She didn't know why. She turned it over in her hands. The bottom was inscribed in very small writing. She could barely read it in Spanish. She recognized enough to make out something like, "For the small things that last." She set it back down, exactly where it had been. Dante watched her do this. He said nothing. He reached for his phone. She sat in the chair across from the desk and listened to him make the call and did not feel triumphant, because this was not a triumph. This was just the next true thing that had to happen. The room was quiet between his words. Outside, the city moved and hummed and had no idea. By the 5th day, the apartment felt like a country with its own weather. Elena had stopped counting the hours. She had started counting other things instead. The number of times Dante moved through the room without making noise when she was concentrated on something. The number of times he had refilled her coffee cup without being asked. The number of evenings they had sat on opposite sides of the same room doing different things in a silence that had stopped being uncomfortable and had become, almost without her noticing, companionable. She did not examine that. She filed it in the same drawer where she had filed the ceramic bowl and the inscription on its bottom, and the way she had said stop deciding and do it, and the fact that he had. The name from the inside had been dealt with. She had not been in the room when it happened and had not asked about the details, because there were things she did not need to know, and this was one of them. What she knew was that Dante had come back into the apartment in the late evening looking the way people look when something that cost them something is finished. She had been at the desk. She had not said anything. She had gotten up and made coffee. He had taken it without a word. They had sat in the quiet and let the evening be what it was. On the 6th morning, things shifted again. Dante came into the main room at 8 with his phone already in his hand, and the particular alertness that she had learned meant something had happened overnight. He did not sit. He stood near the window and told her, in flat, clear sentences, that the rival group had made a decision. Whatever leverage they had planned to use her for had lost its value when their inside source was cut. They were pulling back. The immediate threat was resolved. She was technically free to go. She sat with that for a moment. Free to go. Back to the 4th floor office with the old carpet. Back to the quarterly reports and the audit clients, and the apartment where Marcus's coffee was still in the cabinet waiting for her to be ready. She was ready. She thought she was probably ready. She was not sure what she was ready for, but the coffee was probably not it. She stood. She straightened her dress, a different one, brought up by someone on the 2nd day, plain and gray and not her style but clean. She looked around the room. She had left almost nothing in the guest room. She had arrived with a purse and she would leave with a purse, and the only evidence she had been here at all was the 2nd coffee cup. She went to the guest room and picked up the purse and her phone and her notebook. She stood in the doorway of the guest room for a moment and looked at the plain, clean bed and the window and the lock that had worked from the inside, and she thought about the first night. Sitting on the edge of that bed in the ironed blue dress and the useless heels with her purse on her knees, deciding that tomorrow she would figure out the rest. She had figured out quite a lot, as it turned out. She went back to the main room. Dante was by the window. He had not moved. He was doing the thing he sometimes did, where he looked at the city below with the patience of someone who had made peace with how complicated it was. She crossed the room. She stopped at the desk, and because she could not entirely help herself, she looked at the ceramic bowl. She turned it over. The inscription on the bottom, "For the small things that last." She wanted to ask. She stood there wanting to ask for a full 10 seconds, which was 9 seconds longer than she usually allowed herself to want something she wasn't going to act on. She set it back down. She picked up her purse. She walked to the elevator. Dante moved from the window without hurrying. He came to stand near the elevator and he pressed the call button, and the doors opened immediately, as if the building had been waiting. She stepped in. She turned around. He was standing exactly where he always stood, still, unhurried, the same as the first moment she had seen him adjusting his cufflink in that dim room, as if he had been there forever and would remain there after the doors closed, and the city would simply arrange itself around him. She looked at him, he looked at her. The elevator waited. "The inscription on the bowl," she said. "What is it from?" Something moved in his face, not the almost smile, something quieter, something that had been kept in a room for a long time. "My mother made it," he said. "The year I was 12. She gave it to me the week before she died and told me to put it somewhere I would see it every day." Alina stood in the elevator door and held that information. She had been right that it had wandered into the wrong room and stayed. She had been wrong about which room was wrong. "She sounds like she was worth listening to," Alina said. "She was the only person I never argued with," he said. There was something true in that she did not have a response to, so she did not try. The elevator doors began to close. "Same time next week," she said. It came out of her before she decided it would. The tone was not quite a joke and not quite not one. The same voice she used when she was standing at the edge of something she did not have a name for, and could not stop herself from stepping toward anyway. He looked at her for one long, level moment. The doors closed. She felt the elevator descend. She looked at the closed doors and at her own reflection in the brushed metal surface. A woman in a gray dress that wasn't her style, holding a purse she had brought to a dinner with a man she would never think about again. And she looked like someone who had walked in one direction and come out somewhere completely different. The lobby arrived. She walked through it. She walked out into the city morning, the air cool and wide and full of the ordinary noise of people going places. She stood on the sidewalk and breathed it in. She did not go home directly. She walked 2 blocks to the coffee cart on the corner, her usual cart, the one that had been out of oat milk 2 weeks ago on the Tuesday in the photograph. She ordered a coffee. They had oat milk today. She paid and stood on the sidewalk and held the cup in both hands and let the city move around her. She thought about the photograph on her pillow. She thought about the folder and the numbers, and the shape of money trying to go somewhere without being seen. She thought about the bowl and the inscription, and a 12-year-old boy who had kept it on his desk every day since. She thought about going home and opening the cabinet, and finally throwing out the coffee. She thought about what "same time next week" meant when neither person in the conversation was pretending it was only a joke. She finished her coffee. She put the cup in the bin on the corner. She straightened her purse on her shoulder and started walking. The city was very large and very loud and completely indifferent to the fact that she had just walked through the most disorienting week of her life. That was the thing she had always liked about cities. They did not require you to explain yourself. You could walk through them changed, and they would simply let you pass. She turned left on the next block, which was not the direction of her apartment. It was, she noted, the direction of the building with the marble lobby and the private elevator and the floor-to-ceiling windows. She walked for half a block and stopped. She stood on the sidewalk and had a perfectly clear and honest conversation with herself, the kind she was good at having when she stopped pretending the answer wasn't already obvious. Then she turned around. She went home. She took the elevator to her floor. She unlocked her apartment and put her purse down and went directly to the kitchen and opened the cabinet. Marcus's coffee. She took it out. She held it for a moment. She thought about the Sunday dinners and the specific shape of that particular loneliness, not the grand, dramatic kind, just the quiet kind that sits in cabinets and collects dust and doesn't ask anything of you. She put the coffee in the recycling bin. She stood in her kitchen in the gray dress that wasn't her style and felt the cabinet being empty. She felt, underneath everything, something that was not sadness and not relief, but was the strange, unsettling lightness of someone who has been carrying something for a long time and has just set it down. She went to shower. She put her own clothes on. She made her own coffee. She sat at her kitchen table with her notebook and a pen and began to write, in the clean, clear way she thought through things, what she knew and what she did not know and what she was going to do about both. Her phone was on the table. It did not ring. She did not expect it to. She did not need it to. She wrote for an hour. She crossed some things out and wrote them differently. She came to the last line on the page and read it back to herself. She closed the notebook. Outside, the city was doing what it always did. She looked at it through her kitchen window, the ordinary rooftops, the ordinary sky, the ordinary people going about their ordinary Thursday, as if the world had not shifted quietly on its axis somewhere between a terrible date and a wrong door, and a small ceramic bowl with a painted rim. It had shifted, though. She knew it had. And she had stopped pretending that shift was something she wanted to walk back from. She opened her notebook again. She wrote one more line. Then she closed it and picked up her coffee and sat with the morning for a while, in no hurry at all. She realized, genuinely curious about what happened next. For the first time in 8 months, she was curious about what happened next. That was, she thought, probably enough for now.